Have you ever wondered how they got sound into movies? Well, believe it or not, there is a local connection here within the greater Western New York region, maybe a little bit east of that, but that's okay. Right off of Auburn, we've got the story of the real inventor of sound in movies coming up on this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Men in Honeoye Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome to today's great show. It's very, very cool what we're going to be talking about today. We got a couple of special guests who have co-authored a book by the name of Now We're Talking. That's right. It's all about the sound that got put into movies, who did it, and why maybe we haven't heard that much about him. With me today is Toni and Luke Colella. How are you guys doing today out there in Auburn? How's the weather?
Better.
Better, at least for today. Maybe tomorrow it won't be. But
That's right.
you guys co-authored this book, and I'm just wondering if can you give us first tell us the background. What got you guys initially interested in writing this book? And yeah, we'll start with that. How did you get started in the book?
Well, back in the day, I was a third grader as a spring semester. And I knew that in fourth grade we had to do a famous American project. And we were, exploring the local sites in Auburn, and we stopped by the Cayuga Museum, the former home of Ted Case or Theodore Case. And I really enjoyed his laboratory, his the work that he did in science. And then thought that he would be a good idea to be my basis for the fourth grade project. Unfortunately, when we looked for a book to find facts about his early life, the end of his life, and obviously the middle, the important part, we didn't have anything. There was a book about the Case lab, but nothing specifically about Mr. Case. So my mom had the brilliant idea of writing the book.
So Toni, tell us about the process of writing the book.
Well, I happened to be a teacher in the school Luke was attending, so I knew he needed 10 facts in the beginning, the middle, and the end, as Luke said. And so we combed Auburn. There are many places in Auburn connected with the Case family. And so we combed them and we got research, and everything we found just moved us forward to find more. And two special places. One, we contacted Yale University Alumni Office, where Ted Case attended 1908 to 1912. And they were so happy to copy his entire file and send it to us. This was a file from when he attended Yale up until his obituary. And especially revealing were the alumni questionnaires that were sent out. One especially right after World War I, where Ted Case, in his own handwriting, told us about the secret signaling system that he developed with his invention of the thalified cell and using infrared light so that signals could not be detected by the German U-boats. Thus, he was a World War I hero, civilian hero, saving the lives of hundreds of Allied soldiers at sea. And then the other person we contacted was Jane Case, Theodore Case's only living child, who will be, as you know, Chris, 99 next month. And she was a wealth of information. She read our entire manuscript. gave us 3 full pages of corrections. And in one paragraph, we listed the stars of the first talking movies, and we included Jason Robards. Well, this did not agree with Jane. She said, remove Jason Robards. He married Lauren Bacall after Bogey died, referring to Humphrey Bogart of Casablanca fame. So, of course, he is not in our book. But she went on to tell us many wonderful things about her father. And she has been a dear, close friend for 20 years now.
We'll talk about more about Jane, who I had the pleasure to speak with just moments before the show. We'll talk more about her in the second half. Let's talk more right now, about the process itself of the invention of talking movies. And
Yes.
it was something that Ted Case worked on, and it was first unveiled when with an experimental kind of broadcast with the president with Coolidge. Is that how it started, or how did he
It
come
started
into it?
right. That was with Calvin Coolidge that led up to it. But Ted Case had a passion for light waves and sound waves and their capabilities. In 1911, he writes a letter from Yale University. And I love the way he starts his letters. Dearest Mother, the first sentence, the prom went off finally, and we all had a wonderful time. The second sentence, my time is now consumed with my selenium cell in the hope of photographing sound waves. And that's 1911. So he graduates, he goes back home to work with his father, who was an international scientist, and they move into Dr. Willard's house. Now, Dr. Willard was a relative, but he had a cabinet full of chemicals and minerals. And Ted was still trying to photograph sound waves, but he finds something that is so sensitive to light waves, and he invents the thalified cell, which is what he used in World War I. Okay, so now 1920. Our book just kind of gives a chronological proof of why Theodore Case is indeed the father of talking movies. 1920 comes along, and a man named Lee DeForest calls him. He was another Yale alumni, a few years older than Ted, and he told him about this international race that was going on. It was a race for 40 years, started in 1880. It had involved England and France and Germany and Japan and India. It was a race to put sound on motion picture film. And DeForest was in the race, but he didn't have a clue how to do it, so he calls Ted Case and asks for his help. And that's how Ted Case got into the movie industry. In one of his alumni questionnaires, he says, I hope my work will be useful in agriculture, electrical lighting companies, weather bureaus. He never thought it would be useful in the motion picture industry. But lo and behold, he had in his hand what the world was looking at. So, looking for, thank you. And so here we go. He was asked to make the first film of an American president, President Calvin Coolidge. However, this man, Dr. Lee DeForest, takes full recognition for the invention of Ted Case's sound system. So, of course, they part ways. And a few years later, Ted Case has an interview with William Fox, Fox, 20th Century Fox, Fox Sports, Fox Theater. And they form a partnership called the Fox Case Corporation. And all of their talking movies are now going to be called Movie Tone. They set up the stage. They start making these news shorts in this truck named Movie Tone. There's a wonderful article called New Advances in Talking Movies, where Ted Case explains how his machine must be so simple that it can record and reproduce sound in the same vehicle. Thus, for the first time, we can have talking movies outside of the studio walls. Thus, we have the movie tone truck that can accomplish all that. And newsreels, they call them shorts, newsreel shorts, start popping up in movies all over before the full-length silent movies. And everyone is so excited to hear sound that these newsreel shorts are becoming the talk of the town. Here it is, and of course you know where this location is. It's in Rome. He also filmed a tour of the Colosseum and the changing of the guard in England. And Chris, you'll like this. One of his famous talking movies was of the Army-Yale football game in the Yale Bowl.
Wow, that I probably have seen that at some point along the line. It's a pretty famous film. So, so give us a sense of maybe both how he became more popular but less well known. So, you mentioned two people who were kind of like in his way in terms of getting recognition, which he didn't really seek, right? I mean, he was kind of a
Right.
modest guy.
He was. Yeah. Well, there they are. We talked about Lee DeForest. Can I say one more thing about Lee DeForest?
Sure.
Lee DeForest took recognition of other people's work. Okay, so that's why Ted Case, who was an honest man, separated from him. But in 1928, Lee DeForest had a lot of bankruptcies going on because he duped so many people. So he still had some of Ted Case's equipment, okay, which he sold. And he sold to an entrepreneur by the name of Patrick Powers, who changed the name of Movietone to Cinephone and sold it to an animation director named Walt Disney, who was looking for a sound system for Mickey Mouse in Steamboat Willie. So we can say that Mickey Mouse's voice came from Auburn, New York, and Theodore Case's inventions. We don't know if Disney knows this, but I think they should be thankful for the inventions of Theodore Case. There it is, Steamboat Willie. Now, William Fox, we have to give him credit too. He was an entrepreneur. A lot of people were saying at the time, talking movies, they're going to criminalize people. They're going to ruin their creativity. They're going to be immoral. It was terrible. But William Fox knew that talking movies were going to prevail. At the same time, Chris, and Luke knows, there was
There were two types of technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
There was one where, you know, it was Mr. Case's sound on film. The other was the sound was playing on a separate disc or reel while the film was playing. Um, you know, and it's the downfall of those was highlighted in, was it The Music Man, I believe, or Singing in the
Singing in
Rain,
the Rain.
where you know the sound gets distorted, or there's a glitch and it slows down, and then the picture's, you know, still moving, or my mouth is not moving and the sound is still going on.
So at the same time, there's a picture in our book of a movie theater in Batavia, New York, that has Vitaphone and Movietone. What William Fox did, he knew talking movies were going to prevail. He didn't know which system would prevail. So he hedged his bets and he allowed other movie theaters, movie companies, the big five, to use Ted Case's equipment, which broke the contract he had established with Theodore Case, which said any change in this contract should be negotiated, communicated by the two of them. So thus, in the frenzy that changed from silent movies to talking movies, Ted's equipment was sold and stolen and copied, and as we saw with Patrick Powers, renamed. Now, what happened a couple years later is William Fox is in a terrible car accident. He's owed $15 million to people. And they say he can pay up if he hands over Case's 62 patents. Now, these are just not any patents. These patents were recognized in the United States and abroad. You know, some people go abroad, get a patent, and bring it back and claim it as their own. Ted Case had his lawyers legalize every step of the way. So Ted Case was not a businessman. If his father didn't die in the 1918 smallpox epidemic, he would have been part businessman, part creator, but Ted Case was a pure scientist, and he agreed and handed over the patents.
Well,
So
we'll
another
talk
reason.
more. We'll talk more about Ted Case and maybe a little bit about his family when we come back after this break.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. With us today are Toni and Luke Colella. They're talking about their book, Now We're Talking. I guess we're using the word talking a lot in this particular show. But so let's get to more of a personal kind of thing where I want to know what you guys thought as you actually wrote this book. And I'm going to start with Luke because I have this picture here of kind of like where it all began when Luke started doing this. Luke, tell us a little bit about what it was like doing this book, doing the research, and really finding out something about your hometown that maybe your classmates didn't know about.
Yeah, for sure. It was a really cool experience, to be able to work with my mom. Um, and just discover all this great work that Mr. Case had done, especially someone who was in our backyard or whose backyard we were in. Um, we also, loved baseball at the time, and we went down to Cooperstown. And the whole village of Cooperstown is just all about the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we really wanted to kind of replicate that with Auburn. So in that picture that you showed, the birthplace of talking movies sign, I went in front of Auburn City Council with a resolution to pass, declaring that Auburn, New York is the birthplace of talking movies. We just really wanted to bring awareness to how important Auburn is to talking movies. And back in the day, in the 1920s, even the 1900s, Auburn was this melting pot of theater, of symphonies, and of obviously talking movies, the birth of talking movies.
And Toni, how about you? This was a project that was really came from Luke, but you took a big role, and I know you're a school teacher, so you probably had a natural curiosity in how to do this. But where what was the thing that really stuck out to you or surprised you most while you were doing the research for this book?
Good question. What surprised me the most? Um, I have to say, surprised me the most. I guess the day we got the call from Jane Case and she was so happy to be talking about her father.
Yeah, and we so Jane is really a great person, as you say. I mean, she's actually a historic person. She was involved in the code breakers during World War II, which
Hmm.
were the original hidden figures, women who were brought to Washington to break the codes that really helped us in part win the war. And but more than that, her memory, she's like you say, she's going to turn 99. Her memory remains quite vivid. And she was telling me a story about how her father kind of kept to himself when it came to his inventions. He didn't really brag about them. He didn't think that it was necessary to do that. He told his wife, but he didn't tell his kids. And one day, Jane was telling me that one day she was coming home from Washington. Her friend was friends of the Roosevelt family, and they allowed her friend to bring one guest. They brought Jane, so Jane went to Washington to see Eleanor Roosevelt. On the way back, she took the train, and she had all this luggage with her. She went up to the door, and the door magically opened. And then the next door magically opened. She was so excited. She ran home. She told her father about the story. He was just sitting there reading the paper with his cigar, and really just didn't say much about it. But her mother was the one who took her aside and said, "Jane, your father invented that. He knows that it's there." So
With the
you,
infrared light.
yeah,
Hmm.
you've talked to her much more, Tony, and you probably have a lot more stories to tell about her. What what are some of the fascinating things that Jane has told you?
Well, she said he was a dedicated father. He had 4 children, and he taught them tennis and bowling and soccer and golf. And because they had a summer estate on Owasco Lake, our Finger Lake, he taught them swimming and sailing. And she said he never said an unkind word about anyone. And he'd never said an improper word. And she loves to tell the story that one Christmas she was having some difficulty wrapping a present, and an improper word slipped from her lips. And her father said, "Jane, save some words for the men to say." Oh my goodness. And he was a humble man. Um, with one reading one of the Yale alumni questionnaires, after he had described his accomplishments, he said, "It felt like I was one of the old time advertising mediums seen walking the streets of old New York with a sign on the front and the back." He was brilliant and he was humble. There's an epilogue in a book that we must share. It's, Luke, would you like to read it? It's on page 87.
Sure. The the Jane remembers. One day I came home all upset. I had just read an article in the Sunday or the Saturday Evening Post that gave credit for my father's sound film creations to someone else. I showed father the article. He read it and turned to me in his usual gentle manner. "It's all right, Janie," he told me. "It doesn't matter what others say or think. I know what I did." And that's what we also recognize, like you have, Chris, is that Mr. Case, he knew that he had done his job putting sound on film, and he was just happy that it was successful. He didn't want the praise, or he didn't need the praise.
One of the more interesting stories that Jane told me was they were at their place on Owasco Lake, and someone had come to the door and asked to speak to her father, and he excused himself and went to his study and talked to this person. And later, Jane asked him, why'd you do that? And he said, "Look, if somebody thinks their idea is so great that they're going to walk 15 miles down the railroad line to come and share that idea with me, I ought to
Right.
give them the respect of listening to that idea. But here's the more interesting thing that he said. He said, lots of people have ideas. It's not unusual to have ideas. The trouble is they share those ideas and then everybody gives them reasons why the idea won't work. And so those ideas die. And Jane believes that one of the reasons why her father kind of kept to himself is because why give people a chance to shoot something down? He was just going to go ahead and do it and worry about what people thought about it afterwards. In his mind, the challenge was to complete the process. And in this way, he's a classic engineer. I don't care what people think. I just want to figure out a way to make it work.
That's right. His
Right.
father was an international scientist who taught him the procedures and the persevering attitude of the scientific methods. And they're saying, just to add what you said, there's a quote that Jane told us that's in the book where Theodore Case says, "When I have an idea, I know 200,000 people around the world have the same idea, but they brush it off. But 6 or 7 people somewhere in the world are taking it to heart and working on it." And that's the message Luke and I like to give to people. When you have an idea, cherish it, work on it, pursue it, because it came to you for a reason.
We had a question from the audience, which I think you guys already know the answer to, is how could they learn more? Besides buying your book, which I read, and I encourage you to buy and read. Here, I'll put it in front of my face.
Thank you.
What's in Auburn that is that memorializes Ted Case and what he does?
Oh, we have the Cugin Museum of History and Art, and they're celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of the first word that Ted Case had on his as a sound system, and they say that word is hello. So they have the Case Research Lab that you are welcome to, not this month. This is the month our museums are closed so they can renew themselves. But next month, I believe, you would be able to go through and see some of Ted Case's original technology. And
Excellent.
he had a huge house on South Street that you're welcome to go to. It's called the Chimneys because it has so many chimneys and so many rooms. It had an indoor swimming pool with below surface lighting.
One of the first
Just
in the
one of
country.
the first, just remarkable. And of course, Kazawasco, the estate on Owasco Lake, has 1 mile of shoreline. So it's a huge estate that's now used as a retreat center. It's called Kazawasco, which means Case at Owasco Lake.
All right, that's great. Well, do you have any final closing ideas or thoughts, either Luke or Toni, either one of you, that you want to share with the audience?
Kind of just reiterating the quote with, ideas. It is true. If you have an idea or there isn't an end goal like we had where there wasn't a book, pursue it. Maybe take the time and write your own book about the subject that you find you're passionate about, which is something that we've shared in these past few years.
How about you, Toni?
My closing thoughts, I think the world owes recognition to Theodore Willard Case for this invention that transformed the civilized world, putting sound on film. So any help to raise this recognition, like Luke says, let's make Auburn, New York another Cooperstown like to baseball. But he certainly deserves the recognition, and we're proud to have this relationship with the Case family, this relationship with Theodore Case, and this relationship with Auburn. And with you, Chris. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yes,
I
thank you.
thank you. I thank you. I mean, you guys taught me something I didn't know, and hopefully our viewers are figuring out the same thing, that this is really an interesting story, something that they perhaps ought to look into more. I want to remind everybody that if you want to watch this show live every Thursday at noon, just go to stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com and sign up. You'll get the free private invitation. You could come into the shows and ask questions of our guests live. Otherwise, you can watch it either on our website or on the Facebook page or YouTube channel where it is rerun at 1:30 every Sunday. And with that, I want to thank Toni. I want to thank Luke and say great to have you here. And of
Thank you.
course, we look forward to hearing more
Thank you, Chris.
about everything. Bye bye for now.